The cowboy lost his breath after the bull hit him, until the stable-hand's daughter saved him fast. In the heart of Texas, during a packed rodeo on a Saturday afternoon, a famous cowboy suffers a brutal impact from an out-of-control bull. As the arena descends into chaos, no one suspects that the only person capable of quickly helping him is the quiet daughter of a simple stable-hand, a little girl of just 7 years old who knows animals better than many adults. The arena was breathing tension. The heat of that afternoon in Weatherford seemed to vibrate in the air, rippling over the dirt arena as entire families strolled slowly between lemonade, barbecue, and cotton candy stands. The sweet smell of freshly spread hay mingled with the strong scent of leather, sweat, and dust kicked up by the boots that crisscrossed the yard incessantly. Children ran around with faces red from playing, some with hats almost falling over their eyes, others holding flags of local teams. There was laughter. There were shouts from vendors offering bottles of ice water. There was country music playing softly from a radio propped up in the back of a blue pickup truck. The stands vibrated with chatter. Fathers discussed past rides, young people pointed to the giant bulls being led backstage, and old ranchers observed everything with trained eyes, noticing details that others ignored. The sun beat down on the metal of the railings, reflecting warm light that seemed to embrace the entire arena. Amidst all this movement, the figure of Cole Hargrove emerged, walking as if that heat were just another old acquaintance. He had a firm posture, a broad chest, his hat tilted in a way that seemed calculated, yet natural. Each of his steps raised a little fine dust, as if the earth recognized who was passing by. Cole was more than just an experienced cowboy. He was a familiar face in that county. He won tough rounds, survived falls that made history, and the audience always reacted whenever he appeared, as if a protagonist had just stepped onto the stage. The younger cowboys looked at him with a mixture of admiration and curiosity, trying to imagine what it meant to have that kind of courage. Some novice cowboys even straightened their posture when he passed by, as if his presence demanded it. The preparation for the big moment had an energy of its own. Assistants hurried around with equipment, checking locks, buckles, and ropes, while the announcer tested the microphone, saying something about the greatest ride of the afternoon. Cole observed everything with calculated calm, noticing details that would escape the ordinary eye. He ran his hand over the saddle, as if greeting an old friend. He took a deep breath, drawing in warm air that seemed to come straight from the ground. The sounds of the crowd seemed to recede slightly, creating a bubble of concentration around him. A small boy, in his father's lap, pointed and smiled when he saw Cole adjusting his hat. Some whistles echoed, others clapped simply at his presence. It was impressive how a single man could alter the energy of the arena. The light wind blowing from the south carried distant announcements, laughter, and even the smell of roasted corn, but none of that distracted Cole. He gathered each thought in its place, remembering previous rides, old scars, and the challenge that lay ahead. The judge's tent fell silent as he passed by. The men there knew that a ride with Cole rarely ended without a story to tell. The support team made way, as if recognizing that this moment belonged to him. Sweat trickled slowly down the side of Cole's face, but he didn't seem to notice. The sun might burn, but this arena was his home. High in the stands, flags fluttered slightly, and each tremor seemed to announce that something big was about to happen. People moved closer to the railings to try and get a better view. The tension was so high it seemed almost visible, like a layer of heat rippling above the earth. And then Cole stopped in the center of the arena for a moment. He looked around with half-closed eyes, absorbing that mixture of dust, expectation, and pride. He knew that moments like this don't repeat themselves exactly. A cowboy's life is made of intense minutes and memories that burn deep within the soul. There, in that firm heat, in that space filled with voices, hopes, and the smell of leather. The story was just beginning. Everyone could feel it. The stable hand and his daughter behind the scenes of the rodeo. While the crowd cheered for the cowboys, there was a quieter, more fundamental world, the stables. There, far from the glamour of the stands, Mark worked from early morning adjusting harnesses, cleaning hooves, checking gates, and ensuring that each animal was ready before entering the arena. His hat was old, his shirt worn from use, and his hands carried the history of many years of hard work. He didn't need recognition. His value lay in what he did and the calm way he did it. Beside him stood Evelyn, his 7-year-old daughter, walking with small but sure steps, as if she knew exactly where to step. The girl had large, attentive eyes, the kind that seem to capture the slightest movements that go unnoticed by adults. Her hair, tied in a simple braid, fell down her back, swaying gently each time she turned her head to observe some detail. Those rushing past might see her only as a curious child in the background, but Evelyn possessed a silent understanding of that environment. She had grown up among horses, bulls, and halters. The sound of the animals' heavy breathing was as familiar to her as the sound of her own voice. Often, before sunrise, she would accompany her father as he checked the stables, fed the animals, and made minor repairs. There, she learned the difference between an agitated animal and one that was merely impatient, between an aggressive movement and a movement of pain. While Mark was talking to a colleague about a gate that was creaking more than usual, Evelyn approached an older bull, gently placing her hand on the fence. The animal, recognizing the girl's scent and calm demeanor, slowly turned its head toward her. Evelyn smiled discreetly, as if greeting a loved one. She always behaved with profound respect, maintaining a certain distance until she understood the animal's mood. Mark noticed the interaction and smiled, proud but discreet. He always said his daughter had a special way about her, a kind of sensitivity that can't be taught in manuals or demanded in training. It was something natural, as if she were born understanding the silent language of animals. Even so, he remained cautious, because he knew that the adult world doesn't always listen to a child, especially a child who knows too much. Behind the scenes, some cowboys hurried past, engrossed in their own concerns, often completely ignoring Mark and Evelyn. It was common for the girl to have to quickly duck down so as not to get in the way of someone carrying heavy equipment, but she never complained. She observed everything attentively, absorbing knowledge from every gesture, every mistake, every necessary adjustment within that world full of tension. While some men adjusted the saddle of a nervous horse, Evelyn tilted her head slightly, noticing that the animal was reacting not to touch, but to the distant noise of the arena. She noticed, because her eyes were trained for this. She saw the animal's ear twitch in a particular way, indicating restlessness. She lightly touched Mark's arm and pointed. He looked, nodded, tried to calm the horse, and gave her a quick glance of pride. Evelyn didn't talk much. She preferred to observe, feel, and assess. She was always nearby, always available, carrying small tasks that her father entrusted to her: a bucket of water, a brush, a rope that needed to be folded correctly. Each of her gestures was made with a naturalness that revealed years of living in that world, despite her young age. Passing through the narrow corridor of the stables, she approached Red Fury, the most talked-about bull of the day. She didn't dare touch the fence, not without permission, not without understanding the animal's mood. She simply observed, and in observing, she seemed to pick up information invisible to the hurried eyes of the adults around her. There, in that small, quiet nucleus behind the arena, Evelyn wasn't just a groom's daughter. She was an essential part of the place, as if she had been born among hay and dust, learning to listen to what no one said aloud. And although everyone saw her as small, discreet, almost invisible, there was something inside her that shone like a hidden talent that, on that day, would be more necessary than any adult could have predicted. The silent rivalry of rodeo, the atmosphere backstage, gradually changed as the time for the bull riding approached. The cowboys gathered in small circles, exchanging veiled taunts and hurried comments. It was a mixture of camaraderie and competition, a delicate balance that was part of the soul of the rodeo. Among them, Cole was always the center of conversation. He carried decades of experience, like someone wearing an invisible badge on their chest. When he spoke about a bull, people listened. And that day, the name that circulated most was Red Fury. "That bull doesn't bend for anyone," said a young cowboy, trying to sound confident, but letting slip a nervousness that didn't go unnoticed. Cole smiled slightly, without responding directly, just letting the provocation hang in the air. He knew the weight his silence carried. He knew that every word he spoke could inflame or intimidate a novice competitor. Red Fury was restless that day. He kicked the ground hard, shook his head from side to side, and let out snorts that echoed like muffled thunder. Some men tried to calm him down, but it was like trying to calm a living piece of a storm. The rivalry between Cole and that bull was already a recurring topic in bars, fairs, and local gatherings. Cole had already won difficult rides, but Red Fury was different, unpredictable. Ferocious, resilient, like a raw piece of desert. Amidst the alternating provocations and tensions, Evelyn slowly approached the fence, not to show off, not out of uncontrolled curiosity, but because something about the bull's behavior caught her attention. She observed how he pressed his body against the side, how he turned his head erratically, how his nostrils flared wider than usual. For many adults, that was just the behavior of a dangerous bull. For her, it was a sign of real discomfort. Cole declared loudly that no one has tamed Red Fury, and no one ever will. The men laughed, some nervously, others excited by the prospect of a great spectacle. The phrase echoed through the stable like a kind of indirect challenge. Evelyn heard it, not because she was interested in bravado, but because she wanted to understand what they were about to do with the animal. Her father was busy checking a gate, but he watched from afar as the girl approached the bull. He avoided calling her abruptly. He knew she had a sixth sense for these things. The little girl leaned forward, without touching the fence, just observing Red Fury's heavy, uneven breathing. Something wasn't right. She felt it as if it were an inner warning. The cowboys around, however, spoke of the bull riding as if it were just another epic challenge. Young competitors bet amongst themselves on how long Cole would stay on the bull. Others tried to recount old stories about past rides, exaggerating details to seem more experienced. It was as if the adult world was trapped in the game of pride, while the girl was trapped in the game of reality. The silent rivalry there wasn't just between Cole and the bull. It was between human arrogance and the subtle language of animals. The arena seemed to breathe together, awaiting the moment when words would transform into action. Evelyn remained attentive, her eyes steady, as if she were guarding precious information that no one else noticed. Red Fury stamped his hooves so hard the noise echoed through the stable corridor. Some men instinctively backed away. Cole merely raised his chin, as if accepting the challenge. But Evelyn saw something more. She saw fear. Not in the bull. The fear lay in the cracks of routine, in the assistants' haste, in their ignorance of important signals. The rivalry, at that moment, had the sound of leather being pulled, metal striking wood, and breaths held in the hot air. It was a clash foretold, but no one knew what lay behind it. The girl only knew that something was wrong, and this premonition, small and silent like her, would be crucial to what was to come. The girl's little moral moment. Evelyn continued watching Red Fury, even as the surrounding noise grew louder. The assistants' movements, the hurried conversations, the loud sound of equipment being adjusted, all of this created a curtain of distraction that prevented the adults from noticing the obvious. But for a child who had learned to listen to silence, small signs were like screams. The bull was too agitated. It wasn't ordinary aggression, it was discomfort. The girl frowned, she slightly raised her forehead, gripping the hem of her father's vest, as she tried to get his attention. Mark turned quickly, thinking she needed something, but Evelyn pointed directly at Red Fury, as if showing an urgent problem. Mark looked assessed for a few seconds, and nodded. He saw the unease too, but he was busy. I told her, in my usual calm voice, that everything would be all right. But Evelyn wasn't convinced. She tried to speak to a passing assistant, gently tugging at his shirt sleeve. The man glanced quickly, almost distractedly, heard the girl say that the bull is acting strangely, but only responded with a quick smile before walking away. Her soft, clear, childlike voice was easily drowned out by the noise of the arena. It was as if each of her words was lost in the warm wind. Evelyn persisted. She approached another employee, this time someone more experienced, and repeated her observation. "He's not the same," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. The man looked at the bull again, but saw nothing that caught his attention. Two busy adults, a restless bull is just a restless bull. He gave the girl a friendly pat on the head and went on his way. Evelyn took a deep breath, trying to suppress the discomfort rising in her chest. The feeling of being ignored wasn't new to her. Children, like Evelyn, too calm, too observant, were almost never taken seriously. She knew this, but at that moment, the weight of that reality seemed greater. Still, she didn't back down. She placed one hand on the fence, not to touch the bull, but to hold on tight, and continued studying his every move. Red Fury leaned forward as if something was bothering him inside. His nostrils flared wider than usual. He thrashed his tail with growing irritation. Meanwhile, the adult world continued, as if everything were normal. Cole adjusted equipment, chatted with colleagues, and responded to jokes with his usual confident smile. The audience shouted his name from afar, creating an echo between the metal walls of the stables. The judges were discussing the next competitors, and Evelyn, small and almost invisible in the corner, was the only one who seemed to truly see the danger brewing. She tried once more to warn her father. She tugged at his shirt, pointed again, and this time her expression was more serious than her age suggested. Mark looked, noticed her persistence, and called an assistant to check on the bull's behavior. The man came, touched the fence, observed for a few seconds, and jotted something down on his clipboard. Evelyn felt a small relief, but not enough to reassure her. Even so, she remained there, her eyes fixed, attentive, as if she were following a silent story that only she could read. She felt a responsibility she couldn't explain. Something inside her told her that this moment was important, that someone needed to truly pay attention. As some cowboys began to approach the gate to prepare Red Fury's entrance into the arena, Evelyn took a step back, her eyes fixed on the bull. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from awareness. The girl had seen that kind of unease before, and it always ended in trouble. She took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts, trying to understand how to warn adults who don't listen to children. The feeling of helplessness weighed on her, but her silent courage also grew. Even ignored, she didn't look away. She would stay there, she would keep observing, she would remain attentive to what she could do when no one else was around. Because, even as a child, Evelyn already understood what many adults never learn. When something is wrong, you try. And you try again. Even if no one listens. Even if no one sees. And at that moment, in that merciless heat, in that stable filled with voices and neglect, a 7-year-old girl was the only person truly aware that something terrible was about to happen. Chapter 2. The accident that stopped the arena, the decisive ride, the arena filled with a sound that was a mixture of anticipation and pounding hearts as Cole climbed into the corral to face Red Fury. He entered with the same studied calm he always displayed, like a man who knows every risk and yet accepts the challenge, because that's where his true worth is measured. His boots kicked up dust, the saddle creaked slightly, and the crowd, which until then had been chatting in a celebratory tone, closed in the air just to hear the announcer's first command. There was a dense heat that afternoon. The sun made everything seem slower, more focused. The animal's hide gleamed in the sun, and Red Fury breathed heavily, as if conserving energy for a great move. Cole adjusted the girth, crossed his leg, and placed a firm hand on the halter. There seemed to be no hurry, only the cadence of someone accustomed to transforming danger into a demonstration. Outside, in the stands, families leaned on the railings. Children pressed their faces against the fences, and the older ones clutched coins in their pockets as if that made them part of the event. Evelyn stood in the small opening leading to the animal tunnel, watching with a mixture of curiosity and concern that didn't match her age. She knew Red Fury, not from stories, but from gestures. She knew when a bull shrugged its shoulder in a way that betrayed pain. She knew when its breathing lost its natural rhythm and turned to alertness. Seeing Cole there, so confident, made her chest tighten in a way that made her bite her lip. It wasn't that she doubted Hemet, was that the signs she had heard and seen backstage didn't match the calmness with which most treated the animal. The tension grew in waves. Each second before the gate opened seemed to lengthen and become a rope on which everyone held their breath. Cole looked at the judges, made an almost imperceptible nod, and returned his gaze to the animal. There was respect between man and beast, but also that fine line between control and surprise. The announcer called Cole's name in the loud, drawling voice that the audience had memorized, and the applause came loudly, as if recognizing a tradition and also courage. The attendants opened the gate. The ground vibrated slightly as Red Fury prepared to jump. Cole adjusted his body, the muscles in his arm tensed, and for a moment the entire arena was filled only with the sound of the horse and bull's breathing. Evelyn gripped the fence until her fingers left white marks. She felt something inside her demanding action, though she didn't yet know the best way to proceed. The wind carried the scent of hay and grill smoke. The world seemed a perfect backdrop for the spectacle about to explode. Then, the second the gate swung open and the animal faced the arena, the muffled energy transformed into noise, a roar of people and emotion that enveloped everything. The brutal impact, Red Fury, exploded out of the corral as if an invisible spring had been released, and for an instant it was pure, brute power. A movement designed to throw anyone who dared to balance on its back. Cole entered the movement with experience, but the bull's body was large and unpredictable. There was no time for the audience to absorb the beauty and savagery of the leap before the scene became violence and urgency. The animal spun forcefully, its hind legs tracing air and dust, and for a second everything seemed to unfold in slow motion. The saddle trembled, Cole's leg was thrown to the side, gravity took hold of his body, he fell hard to the arena floor. It was a dry impact that took the air from his lungs, and the sound of the impact reverberated through the stands. The crowd shuddered at the same instant, because in spectacle and danger there is always a tenuous thread that connects everyone present. Cole instinctively tried to straighten his torso, but the weight of the fall and the shock of the impact brought him down again, more slowly, as if his body had forgotten the command to breathe. Before the team could reach the man and the animal, Red Fury, irritated and confused, returned to where Cole lay. The bull struck the cowboy's chest with the force of its massive body. It wasn't a calculated move, an instinctive gesture from the animal in reaction to what it interpreted as a threat or provocation. The sound of the blow was muffled by the dust, but its effect was clear. Cole lost his breath, his face paled for a second, his wide eyes searching for something the fall had taken away. The audience, which had previously cheered for the spectacle, now held its breath, transforming the noise into a tense silence. Evelyn saw everything with the clarity of someone who always observed subtle signs, that blow to the chest, the bent body, the feeling that the air had been ripped from inside someone. There was no bloodshed or immediate agonized screams. There was something more terrifying, because it was simple and true. A man who suddenly couldn't breathe. Rescuers rushed to the center, and cowboys moved in unison to try to fend off the bull and protect what remained of safety. But Red Fury remained restless, distracted by the commotion, and for a few seconds seemed more like a frightened animal than a machine of injury. The scene carried the weight of vulnerability. Seeing a man known for dealing with the violence of his profession reduced to a body gasping for air made many spectators feel, for the first time that day, the true cost of pride and bravery. Cole, motionless for a moment, tried a sound, a breath, an attempt to draw a deeper breath, and the failure of that gesture was the moment it became clear to everyone. He had lost his breath. Chaos in the arena. From the moment Cole fell and lost his breath, the arena transformed into an uncontrolled organism, reacting with confusion and instinct. Shouts erupted in diverse voices, pleas for calm, orders, a child's cry, someone asking for a doctor, all mixed together in a whirlwind. The dust raised by the fall still floated in the air, momentarily reducing visibility and adding a grayish texture to the scene. Assistants and cowboys ran through the arena, trying to isolate Red Fury, striding forward, while others ventured in to get Cole out, protect him, and assess his condition. There was tension in the hands of those working. Some trembled, others moved with trained precision. The bull, still loose, spun around, snorting, startled by the movement and by the very action he had just performed. Unintentionally, he hindered the rescue efforts, attracting attention and representing a continuous threat. The announcer stopped speaking for a moment, as if his voice had lost the function it had had until a few minutes before. The microphone began to transmit only confused instructions and appeals. The crowd, which moments before had been cheering for the spectacle, gave way to concern. Parents grabbed children by the arm, pushed them behind their seats. Others covered their eyes, unable to calmly observe the scene. Paramedics arrived with stretchers, spoke in technical terms, checked pulses, listened for breathing, and assessed concussions. Some people began filming, others bowed in prayer. There was a particular feeling of helplessness, as if everyone wanted, at the same time, to fix what had happened and also slow down time so that more options would emerge. Evelyn stood still for a second, unsure whether to approach or keep her distance. The girl was afraid, but the same sensory clarity that had brought her there made her realize that something could be done to help before the adults finished acting. Her eyes followed every movement of the animal, memorizing the empty spaces between people, calculating possible routes. Some men finally managed to subdue Red Fury, restraining him in a side area with the necessary force to prevent further accidents. But even with the bull chained and away, the tension in the center of the arena didn't subside. Cole was being held by two assistants who were trying to keep his neck still and check vital signs as if every second was crucial. The noise of the crowd made the job more difficult. The clarity needed to hear medical instructions seemed lost in a background of noise. There was confusion about exactly what had happened, whether it was a direct hit, a fainting spell, a collapse, and, while the professionals asked questions and checked vital signs, the public awaited a verdict that would alleviate the panic. Everything there had the weight of an abrupt end to the festivities. The rodeo, which until recently had been a celebration, had transformed into an emergency scene, and the entire arena pulsed with the urgency of those forced to confront the end of something they considered safe. The sound coming from the stands was a mixture of heavy silence and whispers. The narrator, in a low and emotional tone, asked as if speaking directly to the viewer, "Have you ever witnessed a moment when a child saw danger before everyone else? Comment where you're watching from." This question lingered for a few seconds, as if asking the audience to put their own heart into the scene, to remember other times when children's sensitivity was underestimated. At the same time, in the seats and aisles, People exchanged glances and messages, some already, with their cell phones in hand, to tell others what was happening, others taking deep breaths, as if trying to regain their composure. The narrator's phrase was not a mere invitation. It was an opening for those watching to recognize themselves in the flaws and small perceptions that often save lives. In the air, there was a belated recognition of the value of a child's serene attention, and for many, that call served to calm the impulses to condemn or applaud prematurely. It was time to listen, comment, and, above all, realize that something more human was happening there than a simple interrupted spectacle. Meanwhile, on the other side of the arena, teams reinforced the safety zone. Helpers talked to paramedics, and Cole remained enveloped in care, his face still contorted with pain, and his slow breathing trying to regain control of the space. Evelyn finally found a way, among volunteers, to a position where she could clearly see what was happening, and within her grew the feeling that the role she had carried since the stables could now be put into practice. Evelyn understands the real risk. Evelyn stood still for a few seconds, her heart pounding so fast it felt like it was crashing against her small ribs. The dust hadn't yet settled in the arena, and the sound of the crowd was a mixture of fear, anguish, and the shock of what they had just witnessed. But, for her, none of that was as important as what was happening to the animal, which was still moving aggressively and confusedly. Red Fury wasn't just angry, he was scared. The kind of fear that makes a bull attack by instinct, in defense, out of sheer desperation. People saw a threat. Evelyn saw pain. That's what kept her eyes from looking away. She noticed that the bull reacted to sudden movements. This became clear when a cowboy ran too fast down the side of the arena, and Red Fury immediately turned his head, as if to attack again. He didn't attack, but retreated defensively, pawing the ground forcefully, raising more dust, more tension. Evelyn had seen this pattern in the stables, on the quiet mornings when her father tended to the animals, and she learned by observing. She knew that when an animal reacts to any movement as if it were a threat, it's on the edge between flight and attack, and it's on this fine line that accidents happen. She took a deep breath, feeling her chest tighten. Her hands were trembling, but it wasn't fear of the bull. It was fear of what had already happened, and what could get worse. She heard her father call her name behind her, trying to keep her close and away from danger. But Evelyn couldn't control the urge to observe more closely, to try to understand exactly what was making Red Fury so restless. The animal had an expression she recognized, eyes wide open, rapid breathing, uncoordinated movements. He was responding to human chaos, not pure instinct, and that was dangerous. What affected her most was realizing that the adults weren't seeing what she was seeing. They only saw the bull that had injured Cole. They wanted to restrain it quickly, hold it back, push it away, force control over a creature that at that moment had completely lost its sense of security. The more men ran back and forth, the more erratically Red Fury circled. It was as if he were trapped between two forces he didn't understand, physical pain and emotional turmoil. Evelyn felt her hands sweat when she realized that those abrupt movements could provoke another attack. She knew how to calm animals, because she grew up in that environment. She knew the secret wasn't in strength, but in rhythm. It wasn't about pulling, controlling, or imposing. It was about listening, breathing together, slowing down until the animal realized there was no threat. Many times she saw angry bulls calm down when she simply stood nearby, still, letting them feel her presence before any gesture. And in that instant, she realized that no one there had that calmness. That no one understood what she understood. Fear took shape on Evelyn's face as she saw two cowboys approaching the bull too quickly, trying to restrain it with ropes and shouts. For them, it was strategy. For her, it was a trigger. Red Fury recoiled, turned his head, and made a sudden movement that caused everyone to take a step back. Evelyn put her hand to her mouth, unsure how to explain that this would only worsen the situation. What she did know, and she knew for sure, was that Red Fury needed to see someone calm, someone who wasn't there to confront him, but rather to keep him in check. In the center of the arena, Cole still lay motionless, surrounded by paramedics trying to help him catch his breath. Evelyn felt the weight of it all fall on her small shoulders. She was scared, of course, who wouldn't be, but at the same time, a strange feeling of responsibility pulsed within her. Not the kind of responsibility a child should bear, but a simple recognition. She knew something that no one else there knew, and if he did nothing, something worse could happen. It was a silent truth, but strong enough to cut through the chaos around them. Evelyn stepped forward, still gripping the fence, observing the bull's behavior as if reading invisible signs. The movement of its ears, the direction of its snout, the tension in the muscles of its hind legs, everything indicated that it was about to attack again if any sudden movement was made near it. This sent a chill down her spine. She knew she needed to act, even if she didn't know exactly how, but she knew that the fear she felt was not greater than the certainty that she could help in a way that no one there understood. At that moment, Evelyn understood the real risk. Not the risk of a raging bull, but the risk of a desperate animal surrounded by desperate people. And among all the frightened gazes in the arena, only hers held a kind of clarity to mature for her age. The clarity that makes someone act when no one else can. An impossible decision for a child. Evelyn's father realized what was happening too quickly. When he saw his daughter watching the bull, as if analyzing a living equation, his heart tightened. He called her name urgently, his voice trembling, ordering her to stay where she was, but Evelyn couldn't answer. Her eyes were focused on the way Red Fury circled, like gusts of wind that change direction without warning. The girl took a deep breath, trying not to tremble, trying to find some logic within herself. When the bull turned its head towards her and, for a brief moment, seemed to recognize that small, attentive gaze, Evelyn felt her whole body tremble, not from fear, but from decision. The side gate of the arena had a small opening left by the assistants during Cole's rescue. It was narrow, low, just enough for a child to slip through unnoticed. Evelyn felt an inner force pulling her towards that gap, a silent impulse that told her she needed to be inside. Not out of empty courage or theatrical bravery, but because there was more danger in leaving the bull alone in that state than in facing him calmly. Mark realized, too late, when he shouted his daughter's name for the second time. Evelyn was already passing through the opening, pushing the screen with her small hands, entering the arena like someone crossing a border between two worlds, the world where children obey and the world where children save lives. The father's cry echoed loudly, laden with pure terror, and other adults turned at the same time, some indignant, others shocked, none of them believing what they were seeing. A 7-year-old girl, walking towards a bull, weighing almost a ton. A heavy silence fell over the stands. It was as if time had slowed down, just to match her slow steps. Evelyn walked slowly, very slowly, with her hands down, showing the animal that she posed no threat. Her feet sank slightly into the loose earth, and each step was carefully chosen, as if the ground had been designed to explode at any mistake. The girl kept her shoulders relaxed, her breathing calm and deep, trying to control her own fear so as not to transmit it to the bull. She opened her mouth and spoke something almost inaudible. It wasn't an order. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't nervousness. It was the same soft voice she used in the stables when she approached frightened animals at dawn. A voice that said calm, not in exact words, but in rhythm, in presence. Around her, adults moved as if they needed to contain an impending tragedy. But no one dared run to Herbie, 'cause Red Fury turned his head toward the girl and, in a gesture clearly interpreted as focus, fixed his gaze on her. The announcer completely lost his lines. The microphone trembled in his hand. No one knew what to do. Cowboys held lassos, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Mark was pale, his hands in his hair, too afraid to blink for fear of losing sight of his daughter. And Evelyn kept walking, step, breath, low voice, hands outstretched, no hurry, no challenge, no apparent fear. The girls seemed more connected to the bull than anyone else there, as if they had their own language that only worked in that moment. And it was this silent language that made the adults realize that, however absurd the scene, this might be the only real chance to prevent another attack. Evelyn didn't have the strength to subdue the bull, but she had something that no adult had at that moment: true calm. The bull responds to the child's calmness. When Evelyn took her third step into the arena, something in the atmosphere seemed to change. The sound was no longer the confused noise of screams and dust. It was as if everyone had been pulled into a silence of expectation, trapped between fear and hope. Red Fury, who until moments before had been advancing like a hurricane, stopped. He didn't freeze completely, his body still vibrated with adrenaline, but he stopped moving in chaotic circles. His head tilted a few centimeters downward, and his ears turned slightly forward, as if trying to understand this small being that was approaching without haste and without threat. Evelyn didn't take her eyes off the animal. She didn't look at Cole. She didn't look at the audience. She didn't look at her father. Her focus was fixed on the bull, on its breathing, on the way its nostrils opened and closed forcefully, on the way its neck muscles trembled. She understood these signals. She knew the bull was trying to decide whether to attack or retreat, and she also knew that any sudden movement would tip the decision in the wrong direction. The girl took a deep breath, deliberately, rhythmically, slowly. That was exactly how she did it in the stables when approaching an animal that had been startled. Deep in her memory, her father's voice always came back, saying that animals listen more to breathing than to words, and Red Fury seemed to hear it. His chest began to move with a little less urgency, as if trying to keep up with her rhythm, even if involuntarily. The bull took a step to the side, very slowly, almost measuredly. Evelyn did the same, following the movement, showing that she didn't want to dominate anything. That was enough to make a few more dust particles fall to the ground, and for the audience to hold their breath again. The next gesture came from the bull himself. He tilted his head close to the ground and sniffed, as if trying to recognize the girl's scent. And he did, because Evelyn was the one who put feed in his bucket every morning while her father checked equipment, who gently stroked the fence, who spoke softly even when the world was noisy. It was a familiar smell, safe, small, and that made all the difference. The entire arena seemed to have forgotten the Cowboy's fall for a few seconds. Everyone was mesmerized by that unlikely encounter between immense strength and childlike calm. Red Fury took another step, this time further away from Cole. The tension in his shoulders lessened. The dust that had previously risen violently now fell slowly, as if the earth itself had begun to breathe again. The girl, sensing that the bull accepted her there, lowered her face slightly and continued speaking in that low, almost whispered tone. These weren't words of command, but words of presence. The bull wagged its tail with less irritation and stopped searching for threatening spots with its eyes. Finally, it was beginning to calm down. Even if not completely, even if it was still an unpredictable animal, there was a truce at that moment. A truce that only existed because a child had the courage to go where no adult dared. And seeing this, many adults in the arena felt their throats tighten. Because there, before everyone's eyes, something simple and powerful was happening. A fierce bull, which minutes before had attacked an experienced cowboy, was reacting to the pure calm of a girl who only wanted to avoid more pain. A small gesture that, in that circumstance, was worth more than any effort of strength. The path opened to the cowboy when Red Fury shifted his gaze from Cole and began to slowly follow her. Evelyn realized she had created what no one else had been able to, a safe zone, an emotional space where the bull reacted cautiously, not aggressively. It was at that moment that two cowboys, positioned at a calculated distance, understood they had a chance to act. They looked at each other, and in the same second, recognized that movement was only possible thanks to what the child was doing. The girl had given up her place on the board and now the adults needed to use this opportunity precisely. Evelyn continued walking slowly, drawing a semicircle that kept the bull away from the center of the arena. The animal followed her, but not in a threatening wait, was as if trying to understand what that calm presence meant. The girl kept her breathing steady and her hands where the bull could see, repeating the same smooth movements she used when passing through the stables. With each step she took, the tension around her lessened a little, as if a knot was slowly being untied within everyone present. The cowboys took advantage of this shift and approached Cole with the speed of those who know they have little time but can't appear desperate. They moved as if their feet didn't touch the ground, silent, trained, precise. The rescuer beside Cole saw the movement and moved slightly away, making room for the men to pull the fallen cowboy in the opposite direction from which the bull was turning. Cole was still struggling to breathe, his face marked by the impact, but his eyes opened slightly when he realized what was happening. He saw the girl, he saw that small figure being the rock that stopped the avalanche, and his gaze carried a mixture of disbelief and gratitude that only he could feel at that moment. Meanwhile, the bull continued watching Evelyn, following her with slow steps, unaware that the men behind were carrying the wounded cowboy to safety. It was as if all the creature's attention was focused on that girl with the simple braid and confident steps. The confidence she exuded was so pure that the animal felt no threat, only curiosity. The audience, caught between panic and admiration, dared not make a sound. It was like witnessing a moment that belongs not to logic, but to instinct. The path Evelyn created was like an invisible corridor, defined by her calmness and the bull's response. In this way, the cowboys managed to lead Cole to the fence, where paramedics awaited him for immediate treatment. Some spectators began to cry, others held hands, cheering, as if watching a delicate operation, and when Cole was finally pulled into the safe zone, a collective sigh swept through the entire arena, like wind escaping from a huge lung. Evelyn wasn't finished yet. She needed to take a few more steps, pushing Red Fury to the side, until the officers could, with great care and perfect timing, close the gate behind him. Only when she heard the metallic sound of the gate locking did the girl allow her body to relax, and, even then, only slightly. Her father ran towards her as soon as he realized the danger had passed, and when he finally reached her, he hugged her tightly, as if thanking her for all the things he never imagined she was capable of doing. The arena, still silent, witnessed in disbelief what a child had just accomplished. And in that instant, everyone there understood something they would never forget. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage comes from those least expected, from someone small, humble, ignored, from someone who doesn't shine through triumph, but through the purity of their intention. Evelyn had saved a man and calmed a beast, not with force, but with her presence, and that would change everything from then on. Salvation and revelation. Cole, breathless, struggling to breathe, Cole lay in the hot dust of the arena, his chest heaving in short, irregular efforts, as if his body had forgotten how to draw air. Dust clung to his sweaty face, creating a mask of pain that made each second more desperate. The paramedics knelt around him, trying to stabilize his neck and monitor his vitals, but nothing seemed more urgent than the fact that he simply couldn't breathe properly. The impact of the bull had taken more than air. It had taken away the control a body accustomed to risk should have. His eyes were half open, but it was as if they were searching for guidance amidst the chaos. It was the expression of a man who, for the first time in years, didn't know if he would ever be able to get air back into his own chest. The surrounding sounds had faded into a muffled murmur. People who had once vibrated with energy were now leaning forward, gripped by the anguish of seeing someone so respected reduced to utter vulnerability. Evelyn's father held her tightly, but the girl, with tears welling in her eyes, stared intently at Cole, as if she could feel his pain piercing the heavy air between them. She understood that his body was trying to regain its rhythm, but despair was also hindering it. It was something she had seen in wounded animals. When panic takes hold, even breathing becomes an enemy. The nearest rescuer tried to guide Cole to breathe slowly, speaking short, clear, firm words. But Cole was in shock, and the sound seemed not to reach his consciousness. His fingers moved against the ground, trying to find support, trying to grasp something that would bring him back. Sweat trickled down his temples, and for a moment, he seemed to want to stand up, as if the stubbornness that had guided him through so many detours was trying to save him again. But his body wouldn't respond. His chest rose and fell in frantic attempts, and the despair etched on his face was a sight that would make any hardened Texas man's stomach churn. The girl then slipped from her father's grasp, driven by something stronger than fear or prudence. She walked slowly toward the rescuers, and when the men looked at her in surprise, Evelyn simply knelt beside Cole's arm. Her father tried to call to her, but his voice mingled with the surrounding noise. The girl placed a small hand over the cowboy's hand, which was clenched with pain. Cole's eyes widened, feeling the unexpected touch and, perhaps for the first time since the impact, something there seemed to bring a moment of focus. Evelyn leaned her face closer to his, and breathed slowly, very slowly, as she did with frightened animals, a long, deep, rhythmic breath that seemed to expand the space around her. Cole looked at her for a moment, as if trying to understand what that small figure was doing there, in the midst of the crisis. And she repeated, she inhaled and exhaled calmly, demonstrating with her own body what he needed to do. It wasn't a command, it wasn't a request, it was a silent and pure demonstration of presence. Her gaze conveyed something that the rescuer's words couldn't: safety. Cole tried to keep up. The first attempt failed. The second, too, but Evelyn remained there, looking directly at him, without blinking, breathing slowly and deeply, again and again, until the cowboy finally managed to draw in a slightly longer breath. That made his chest move more forcefully, as if his body were remembering the lost path. The rescuers noticed the change and began to guide his breathing more precisely, giving instructions that now, with Evelyn by his side, seemed to finally reach his consciousness. The arena watched in complete silence. It was as if everyone was witnessing a miracle that wasn't happening through divine intervention, but through the courage of a child and the unexpected connection between two completely different beings. Cole, still breathless, squeezed the girl's hand gently, as if to say, I'm here, I'm coming back. And Evelyn responded by squeezing back, showing that she was lending him her calm in that critical moment. Gradually, his breathing regained its rhythm. Still irregular, still painful, but enough to allow the paramedics to continue the treatment more safely. Color gradually returned to Cole's face, like the morning light pushing away the shadows. And all this happened while Evelyn continued to look at him, offering what no one else could give, a kind of strength that isn't measured in weight or muscle, but in purity, sensitivity, and courage. The crowd realizes who saved the cowboy. The silence in the arena began to gradually transform, as if each spectator were waking from a collective trance. Dust still hung in the air, illuminated by the Texas sun like golden particles suspended in time, and, at the center of that almost cinematic scene, was a 7-year-old girl holding the hand of an injured cowboy, guiding his breathing as if she knew exactly what to do. People began to realize, little by little, that this moment was not ordinary. It wasn't just a serious rodeo accident. It was the scene of a child doing something that no adult had the courage or sensitivity to do. In the stands, a woman placed her hand on her chest and began to cry silently as she watched Evelyn, A man removed his hat, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of disbelief. Cowboys, who normally spoke with bravado and arrogance, were now standing silently, their eyes fixed on the small figure with braids. Her presence, which had previously been almost invisible, now shone like an emotional beacon amidst the chaos. The same girl, whom many had ignored during the afternoon, now stood before everyone, as the only one who truly understood what needed to be done. Evelyn's father, his legs trembling, watched his daughter from afar with a mixture of pride and terror. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He knew she was sensitive to animals and he knew she was brave, but he never imagined she would be able to enter the arena during an attack, calm a furious bull, and then help an injured man breathe. It was more than instinct. It was a kind of emotional maturity the world rarely recognizes in children. He wiped away a quick tear before anyone could see, but his expression said it all. His daughter had done something extraordinary. The rescuers, as they worked around Cole, began to glance at Evelyn with respect and astonishment. One of them even let out a, "How could this be?" The girl was kneeling, still breathing slowly, ensuring that Cole kept up with her pace. The cowboy, in turn, fought against the pain, but had enough strength to squeeze her hand once more. The gesture was small, but full of meaning. He knew, deep down in his still blurred consciousness, that this child had been a vital part of his survival. The announcer, who had been speechless until then, finally found his voice, but it came out faltering, trembling, as if he were trying to hold back tears. He didn't make a heroic speech or shout dramatic phrases. He didn't dare break the delicacy of the moment. He simply murmured into the microphone something like, "This little girl, this little one, she saved him, and the phrase echoed through the arena with the impact of a revelation. People looked at each other, some with their mouths open, others nodding slowly. It was as if everyone had realized at the same time that they had just witnessed something rare, precious, and profoundly human. A young cowboy, who had previously seemed overconfident, ran a hand over his face and looked away, ashamed that he had done nothing. Another, older one, crossed his arms and let out a long sigh, the kind that carries silent recognition. Amidst so many people accustomed to measuring courage in terms of strength and bravery, there was true courage, the courage of a child who did not hesitate because he knew what needed to be done. Photographers, who had previously hidden among the crowd, began to record the scene, but they did so respectfully, without interrupting. It was an image that would never be forgotten. Little Evelyn, in her simple farm clothes, holding the hand of a cowboy who could have died if she hadn't intervened. The bull had already been taken to the other side of the arena, still restless, but distant. The danger zone was under control, but the emotional zone still pulsed, strong, alive, ingrained in the memories of everyone who was there. The crowd knew and now assumed that this child was the reason Cole was still breathing. There was no speech, no official announcement, no spotlight, but the recognition was evident in the eyes of everyone there. A deep, sincere recognition, impossible to ignore. And Evelyn, still kneeling beside Cole, didn't notice any of it. She was focused only on him, on his breathing, on the certainty that he would be all right. She wasn't seeking applause, she didn't even imagine she had any. She was just a girl doing what she thought was right. The quoted phrase that changes everything. Cole took a few minutes to regain enough physical control to speak, but his eyes had already regained some life, still weak, still lost, but full of a quiet gratitude that needed no explanation. The sound of his irregular breathing echoed in the arena as a reminder of the recent danger, and the paramedics made quick assessments to decide whether to put him on the stretcher immediately or wait a few more seconds. Evelyn remained there, holding his hand with gentle firmness, as if it were the anchor keeping him connected to the present. When Cole finally managed to turn his head slightly toward her, the movement was small but significant. His eyes met hers, and for an instant, everything around them disappeared. the distant noise of the crowd, the metallic sound of the gates, the murmur of the paramedics. There were only the two of them, connected by something that defied ordinary words. He took a few seconds trying to prepare his voice, but only managed to exhale torn breath. He tried again, pushing the pain away as if it were a stone in his path. And then finally, he managed to articulate something in a hoarse, short, almost broken whisper. "Girl, you gave me back the air I lost." The phrase echoed through the surrounding space like a silent lightning bolt. The rescuers stopped for a second. The cowboys froze mid-step, and the crowd, hearing the phrase through the announcer's sensitive microphone, reacted with a mixture of tears and disbelief. It was a simple phrase, but enormous because it didn't just speak of breathing. It spoke of dignity, of life, of recognizing something greater than any mount or trophy. Cole, a man known for his toughness and self-sufficiency, was admitting before everyone that his life was in the hands of a child. Evelyn opened her eyes slowly, as if trying to make sure she had heard correctly. Her face flushed, not from embarrassment, but from contained emotion. Her father put his hand to his face and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the phrase pierce his chest like a truth he already knew but had never heard so clearly. The medical team exchanged quick glances, recognizing that this moment was as important as any technical procedure. It was a phrase that restored something within Cole and within everyone who heard it. The announcer, his voice trembling, repeated softly into the microphone, "You gave me back the air I lost." And the phrase echoed through the stands as if it were a spontaneous prayer. People began to cry again. Some hugged each other, others put their hands over their mouths, shocked by the depth of that gratitude. And it wasn't an exaggeration. Those who were there felt the moral impact of that moment physically. It was like witnessing the exact moment when one soul bowed before another. Cole squeezed the girl's hand more consciously now, showing that he was truly present, that he knew exactly who he was talking to. Evelyn smiled, small, shy, almost hidden smile, as if she didn't know how to react to so many emotions. She hadn't done anything seeking recognition, and hearing that seemed too much for her small world. But she kept her hand there, firm, as if silently saying that she was still with him. The audience began to applaud hesitantly, first as if afraid of breaking the moment, then more decisively, more emotionally, until the entire rodeo was filled with applause, some loud, some trembling, some accompanied by muffled sobs. It was the kind of applause that didn't celebrate a victory, but an act of pure humanity. And, for the first time that day, the emotion seemed greater than the accident, greater than the danger, greater than the pain. Red Fury, on the other side of the gate, also reacted to the sounds, but now he was calmer, breathing more slowly, as if the turmoil had finally left his body. He was still a savage force, but he seemed to have recognized that the moment now belonged to the humans who were there, especially that child. Cole tried to speak again, but the paramedics asked him not to strain his voice. Even so, he kept his gaze fixed on Evelyn, making it clear that he wanted to say more. Perhaps he would never find exactly the right words. Perhaps that moment was simply that, a broken cowboy, recognizing that a quiet and sensitive little girl had saved his life with something as simple and as powerfully rare as pure courage. The arena remained charged with emotion, as if the air were both denser and lighter at the same time. Cole's words still echoed within the audience when the narrator, sensitively, in a softer tone than usual, made the traditional pause, but this time it seemed part of the moment itself, like a necessary breath after so much tension. His voice came through the speakers at a lower volume, almost intimate, as if speaking directly to the hearts of those watching. If this small gesture touched you in any way, leave a like for more true stories like this, and comment below if you believe that courage can come even from the smallest among us. The pause fell like a gentle wave. It didn't interrupt the moment. It amplified it. It was like telling people that if they were moved, they weren't alone. That what they had just seen wasn't just an event at a rodeo, it was a universal reminder of humanity, sensitivity, and strength coming from unexpected places. The way the narrator phrased the question seemed more like an invitation for each viewer to release the breath they had held during the previous minutes, as if asking them to connect emotionally with something larger than the specific scene. People in the stands, even those who knew nothing about technology or social media, felt that the pause had a purpose. It was a moment when many put their hands to their chests, trying to process what they had seen. At home, anyone watching that video would feel the same. This pause, far from breaking the spell, helped to organize the feelings within each person. Because there was something extremely true in that instant. It wasn't just a child saving a cowboy. It was a powerful reminder of how the world sometimes forgets the value of sensitivity. Around Evelyn and Cole, the paramedics continued working, but now, with more composure. They knew Cole was responding better, and that the girl had been the anchor throughout the chaos. Evelyn's father, still trembling, approached slowly, respecting the doctor's space. But he couldn't stop looking at his daughter, with tear-filled eyes. There were no more screams, no more despair. There was gratitude, pure, deep, silent gratitude, that filled the arena like a warm light falling on everyone. The bull, on the other side of the gate, also seemed to absorb the calm, breathing slowly, as if the atmosphere had finally regained order. Some cowboys approached Evelyn's father to say things he heard, but didn't fully register. So fixed was his attention on his daughter. The pause in engagement, there at that moment, made sense. It was organic, genuine, as if the narrator were guiding the audience into the same deep breath that Evelyn taught Cole, the girl herself, without fully understanding the weight of what she had done. Looked at Cole with a kind of sweet concern, hoping he could continue breathing properly. She wasn't seeking recognition from anyone. The pause wasn't for her. It was for those watching, for those who needed to process the impact. Because, while adults dealt with adrenaline, protocols, and responsibilities, Evelyn dealt with the most basic of human instincts, care. The narrator left a short silence after the sentence, as if giving space for the emotion to find a place to rest within the heart of each spectator. It was a necessary, respectful silence, not the kind of empty silence, but one that respects what had just happened. And when the narrator's voice ceased, the arena remained enveloped in the vibration of Cole's words. In Evelyn's courage, and in the collective recognition that this moment would be remembered for a long time by many people. The following minutes were a mixture of relief, hard work, and emotion coursing through everyone present. The paramedics decided Cole needed to be taken to the hospital for further examination. But it was already clear he was out of immediate danger, and much of that was due to little Evelyn's intervention. The girl, now embraced by her father, watched the rescuers adjust the stretcher with a mixture of attention and fear. As if part of her was still trapped in the moment, she held Cole's hand and helped him breathe. Her father walked with her, keeping his arm firmly around her shoulders, as if he wanted to ensure that nothing else could hurt her that day. As Cole was carefully lifted and placed on the stretcher, he slowly turned his head toward the girl. He didn't need to speak. His grateful, deep, sincere gaze said it all. He raised his hand slightly, and Evelyn, with a timid step, approached close enough to take his hand again. The cowboy smiled with his lips, not his whole face, because the pain was too great. But that small smile carried the weight of a man acknowledging a debt he can never repay. He blinked, slowly, as if to say thank you again, and the girl returned the smile, with another small, almost hidden, but meaningful smile. As the stretcher was carried to the ambulance, the crowd parted, in respectful silence, as if watching a procession. People touched their hats, crossed their hands, and made small gestures of reverence. It wasn't for the accident itself, but for the courage they had just witnessed. Evelyn walked beside her father, looking at the ground as if trying to process everything that had happened. but still feeling the vibration of the danger she had faced minutes before. In the following days, Evelyn's story spread throughout the county. At the small corner market, in the gas station line, at Sunday church, and at the local cafe where residents gathered to talk about life. The news didn't just mention Cole's accident, but the girl's act. Children commented on her with admiration. Adults spoke of her with pride and respect. The local press requested interviews, but Mark refused. He knew his daughter didn't need the spotlight. She had done what she did because of who she was, not for applause. When Cole was finally discharged from the hospital and able to return home, he paid a special visit to the stable where Evelyn spent her afternoons, helping her father. The girl was feeding one of the horses when she heard slow footsteps behind her. She turned and found Cole, still a little bruised, but steady. He smiled, and she smiled back, somewhat awkwardly. Cole approached slowly, placed his hand on his hat, and made a gesture of respect that he rarely made to adults, much less to children. He said, in a firmer voice than on the day of the accident, that he would never forget what she had done, that there weren't enough words to explain the significance of the moment. She helped him catch his breath. Evelyn lowered her face shyly and replied that she only wanted to help, as she did with animals. Cole laughed, a weak laugh, but full of warmth, and said that perhaps the world needed more eyes like hers, eyes that saw before others, eyes that felt what no one else felt. Her father watched the scene from a distance, moved. For a moment, he felt pride at becoming something so big it couldn't fit inside his chest. Evelyn and Cole stayed there for a few minutes, talking little, but understanding a lot. And when the cowboy turned to leave, he stopped at the stable door and said, looking at her with absolute sincerity, that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world least expects. Evelyn simply smiled, returning to her work with the animals, as if nothing had changed. But something had changed for her father, for Cole, for everyone who witnessed that day, because the face of a shy and sensitive girl had become the symbol of the purest strength that exists, the courage that springs from care, empathy, and the instinct to protect. The story would be told for years in that town. And no one would ever forget that, on that hot Saturday, at the Weatherford Rodeo, a 7-year-old girl saved a cowboy and calmed a wild beast with nothing but her presence, her composure, and her heart.